Welcome to the Grow Your Business and Grow Your Wealth podcast with Gary Heldt. Gary is an expert in helping business owners put together a plan that will provide a better future for their businesses, themselves, and their families. On the podcast, Gary interviews other professionals who share his vision, and together they share secrets and strategies any business owner can use to build a better financial foundation for your business and your life.
Hey, welcome back to our podcast. This week, my guest is Glenn Rudin, and he's the founder and CEO with Always Been Creative. Welcome, Glenn.
Hey, Gary, it's great to be here. Great to have a little convo with you before this, and I'm excited to have this conversation with you. Thanks for the opportunity.
Sure. So Glenn, give us your background. Obviously, you and I talked a little bit. You went to University of Maryland, which is close to me. And kind of where'd you go after you graduated Maryland?
Yeah, so I'm originally from northern New Jersey, went back home and started my career working in consumer packaged goods. I worked for Sherwin-Williams, the paint company. I worked for Revlon, the cosmetic company, then went over to another cosmetic company called Shiseido, then Cheesebro Ponds. A number of companies like that. And one of the things I loved about working at those companies was, number one, I loved product development. It was really, really something I always wanted to get involved in from when I was really young. I was always fascinated by how these products come together, how they get labeled, how they get branded, how they get packaged, how they end up in stores. And I'm fortunate that I ended up in that space. So I spent a career doing that. And the way that it comes full circle for me is I started to realize about 10 years ago that there were real similarities between the way products are marketed and we as people market ourselves. In other words, if I pick up, some random product that, that's sitting on a shelf someplace, it's going to be sitting in a package, it's going to have a label on it, and maybe as you're walking down an aisle in a store, you're attracted to it. Well, we as people have the ability to position ourselves, brand ourselves, clothe ourselves in ways that we want to make ourselves appealing so that when someone is coming in contact with us, right, they're going to be interested in having a conversation with us. And so using the background that I had in branding, product development, have now taken that full circle to look at people and say, listen, you're really a product to me. How can I help you develop your branding and messaging?
Right. From working there, and then you decided to go out on your own and start your own thing. What was it that really kind of pushed you to take that step? Because I mean, obviously, that's always a big step when somebody decides to go out on their own and start their own thing.
Oh my God, Gary, it's a great question, and I love the answer that I can give you to this because I was working at one of the companies that I'm describing, a different one. It was a Fortune probably 1,000 company, and I was based in New York, national sales manager, and I felt really creative ideas for how this company could expand its business. And every time I would put something out there to the corporate chieftains, I was always met with this, that's great, Glenn, but we've already got a whole catalog of stuff that we're working on. So just do us a favor, sell the catalog. That's the answer I always got back. Sell the catalog,
Right.
sell the catalog. So a couple years into working for this company and that same sell the catalog mentality, one of the clients that I had was looking for a company independent of the one I was working for. They said, "You're right. Do you know a company that we could go to that would help us develop our own line of products, things like that?" Because this company, up until that point, had been buying a lot of the catalog items that we had, and the client happened to be the Ringling Brothers Circus. So it was a big
Oh, wow.
client,
Yeah.
one of the biggest, in the entertainment industry. And I said to them, listen, I don't have the company for you today. This was maybe a Thursday or a Friday, but if you give me a couple days, I might have an answer for you. So it wasn't for them such an urgent thing that they had to do it tomorrow,
Right.
but it was an urgent thing for me. I saw this as this is going to be my opportunity to jump out and either land on my face or have a parachute. And I knew somebody that I had networked with that I actually met on the Long Island Railroad, commuting back and forth to New York, who was a successful business owner himself in a different category. He worked had his own business in the hosiery business. So I put together a proposal. I went and met with him and dangled this whole idea of, listen, this is Ringling Brothers Circus. There is huge potential here. And he was unsure about it, right? Because there was nothing guaranteed. It wasn't like they had an immediate contract for us. But he said, listen, here's what I'll do. I'll give you 6 months to get this off the ground. And if it's a success, you and I are both going to be really happy, and it's going to be a great story that we'll both have forever. And if it's not, you'll have to be looking for another job, because I'm not going to carry you forever. A lot of pressure. At the time, I was married, 2 young kids, mortgages, all the car leases, all that responsibility. And the people who I knew were like, are you crazy? You're making a nice living with this company and sell the catalog, right? That whole idea. And I was like, nope, not for me. So I got back in touch with Ringling Brothers Circus about 5 days later. And I said, that company that you were looking for that didn't exist last week, this week it does exist. And they're like, oh, well, that sounds interesting. When can you come down to they were based in, they think they still are, in Vienna, in Virginia.
Okay.
And I said, yeah, we'll pull our team together. We'll be down there next week. And I resigned from right in the middle of a national sales meeting. I just didn't show up for the national sales meeting. And they're calling me on the phone. They're like, Glenn, where are you? The national sales meeting started. And it's like, I'm gone. You guys have a good time selling the catalog, but I'm out. And we started this, and I'll just go a little further in the story. So we had this meeting, and before we had this meeting with Ringling Brothers, I assembled a team of really creative artists, and we put together about 200 different concept boards. This was really just all betting on what might be going on. Our team goes down to Virginia, and we sit with Ringling Brothers, and we have about an hour meeting. And board after board, we're showing them this concept. At the end of about an hour, they said, listen, we need about 10 minutes to huddle up, and we'll be back. Just make yourselves comfortable. And they came back 10 minutes later, and they said to myself and my team, we've got good news and bad news. And we're like, ooh, that sounds kind of ominous anytime somebody says that to you.
Right.
And we said, well, you know what? It's been a long day. Why don't you give us the good news first? And the good news was, we're so impressed with the work that you did and the fact that you think you can deliver this, that we want to give you the rights to manufacture all of our items for Toy Story on Ice. Now, Toy Story at that time was the first Toy Story. It was a huge sensation in the toy business. This was going to be a smash. We're like, wow, that's amazing. This is an unbelievable opportunity. Can't wait to get started. Oh yeah, wait a minute. What's the bad news? And they said, the bad news is we also have this other property called Pocahontas, which was another one of the Disney princesses. And we want you to do the same thing for that one as well. And we were like, wow, the first one was great, but overwhelming, because we had to develop about 80 different items for them.
Right.
Well, now that workload just doubled, and we had a really short window to deliver all these products to them. And I would say about within 3 weeks of that meeting, Gary, I was over in China sourcing, doing exactly what I wanted to do for the other company. And now I was doing exactly what I wanted to do. So, my message about that to people who are thinking about starting their own thing, who have this entrepreneurial spirit, and they're waiting for, quote unquote, the perfect time to do it. I always say it doesn't exist. You make it the perfect time based on the effort you're going to put into it. But if you're waiting, I've heard people say, wait till you have 9 months of savings in the bank, wait till the stars align, wait till the market is better and the interest rates are down or whatever. And the truth is, you could wait for all those things, and it's still never going to be the perfect time. So the perfect time is now. And the sooner you start, the sooner you find out whether or not what you're thinking of is viable or not viable. And so I love telling that story, because that's a long, long time ago, and I never look back.
All right. So I know a lot of the listeners are probably thinking the same thing right now. How is that bad news that we have a second thing we want you to do? I don't quite understand that one, but
yeah.
so from there, you guys have done a lot of things. You've done a lot of things. You work with businesses and getting their message out, helping them create their message, but you also do that with individuals also. Can you talk to us a little bit about, what you're seeing as some of the common mistakes that the business owners are making when it comes to, creating a message or not creating a message and what that
Oh,
does?
absolutely. Again, I'm super passionate about this because as you and I talked, off
Hmm.
air, off mic beforehand, most colleges don't ever take the time to do this with people,
Right.
Gary. And so we kind of end up out in the world and we don't really know that this is something that's even really required of us. And so for the longest period of time, we just wing it, which is really the worst thing we can do. So the first thing that I tell people, and by the way, 9 out of 10, 90% of the people that I meet at trade shows, at Chamber of Commerce meetings, your BNIs, your diner meetings, your meetings at Starbucks, your trade show meetings, all those things, 9 out of 10 people struggle with all of their messaging, all of their personal branding, all of their communication skills, or at least some portion of it. So it is rampant out there. So if you're hearing me and you know this is you, you've got something in common with a lot of people out there.
Hmm.
The first thing that I tell people they need to do is they really need to get intentional with understanding what is their message, what is the value of their company. So I take whether it's individuals or companies through this exercise, which is called fleshing out their purpose and positioning of their business. And it's real. You and I were talking earlier about basic blocking and tackling. The first
Hmm.
thing is, why does your business even exist? Why does it exist? Like you're in it, you've been doing it for 5 years or
Right.
10 years or 20 years, but why does it even exist? Right? Can you even explain that to me in a sentence or two? Right? You're in the finance space, right? My company exists because people are terrible with numbers or they're not organized with the way they run their finances. And I help ease that burden on them by taking the burden of finance off of them. I'm not saying that's your message, but
Sure. Yep.
something like that. But just why does your business even exist? Okay, now we know why it exists. And the second question is, okay, how's it different than everybody else that's out there doing something similar? Because this is a key point, right? It's going to be 2025. If your business is just opening, then we've been living without it for over 2,000 years. So there's a pretty good chance we could continue. And, we're going to be able to do just fine without your business even starting up. That's for somebody who's starting something new. But if you're in the business of, let's say, a service business, if you're a real estate agent, if you're in finance, if you're a financial planner, if you've got a restaurant or a coffee shop, you've got competition out there no matter where you are for all of those things. And what you're really trying to do is change a buying pattern for somebody that's out there. So here's a good example. One of my clients was opening a new coffee shop in the Cincinnati area. And I said to her, well, what's going to be different about your business? And she said, what do you mean? I said, well, you already told me why your business exists. You think you make great coffee. Okay, that's great. But do you understand? I just went right on a Google map and showed her, I'm circling 2 miles around your coffee shop. There's 20 places between Starbucks, 7-Eleven, Dunkin' Donuts, independent coffee shops, and all of these places, people already have a buying pattern. They know how to drive there. They know where they're going to park. They know what they're going to order. Now, why are they now all of a sudden going to change that habit? Go to your coffee shop.
Right.
Why does your coffee shop exist? What are you going to do there that's different for them? How's the experience going to be different, right? In other words, what's going to make me stop going where I went and go to you? And so that same question exists regardless of what business you're in, right? If you're in finance, right? I already have an accountant. Why am I going to think about switching my accounting to you? Maybe
Mhm.
you do an annual financial review. You add something extra to the mix that I don't get now, or
Right.
you've got quarterly check-ins with your clients and I don't get that now from the person who's doing that kind of work for me. So it's really important to understand why your business exists and how is it different in what it does and how it delivers it to the world. Because if you don't know what's different about what you do, better about you do, faster about what you do, more efficient about what you do, add-ons to what you do that make you stand out versus your competitors, there's no reason for us to think about switching.
Right.
And people just don't understand that. They'll show up at these meetings, right? And they'll say, well, this is what I do. And I'll just, I'll be puzzled and think, okay, well, everybody in the room's got that
Right.
already. Why do we
Right.
need you? Right? What are you
Right.
doing here? What's different about it? So that's probably the one of the most important things. And then, of course, once we figure out what you do differently, now the messaging. How are we going to describe that so that people clearly understand what you do is different, that they get something better from you? And that's really where that messaging comes in, right? We've got a better way of doing it. We've got a different way of delivering it. We bring it to you faster, more efficiently. There's some other value that we add to it. And that's when you get people leaning in and thinking, oh, you know what? My provider doesn't do that. Maybe I should have a little bit more of a conversation with this person and see if it's a good fit.
So, you talked about the coffee person. Can you give us an example of somebody who's been in business for a little while? Because a lot of our listeners have been in business for a while, that you've come across and that you've helped them. I'm going to say grow their business because they were doing good anyway, or they were there, and then you helped them with their message to be able to kind of push them over the edge. Can you give us an example of someone that you've helped and the story behind it?
Sure, sure. So one of the clients that I had back here recently was a, uh, uh, I'll call it a salon that really specializes in wigs for women who have hair challenges.
Hmm.
And this is a business that she inherited from her mother. So it has a long standing root in its community, not too far from where I live here in Long Island. And one of the things that I think that she didn't realize was that, and this was mainly for women, that women who go through, let's say, chemotherapy, sadly, right? One of the side effects
Yep.
is losing your hair. And but there are a lot of other ailments that cause women to lose their hair. There's just all different conditions that they have. And because it's so closely related to how a woman feels about herself, right? The beauty aspect of it, how she feels about herself, that when she notices, if a woman notices she is losing her hair, it's a really personal matter.
Right.
And what I pointed out to her was, listen, when you're doing your pitch, it's really, really important for you to say, listen, I know this is a really personal matter, and you probably are not going to raise your hand at the diner or the BNI meeting or at whatever get together we have and just come out and say, hey, I'm losing my hair, because it's embarrassing. And so it's really important to position this as, you can really talk to me in confidence. You don't even have to be my client, but I specialize in helping women understand all the different ways that hair loss happens and all the different methods that we can deal with it, so it's not something that bothers you going forward. So even if that's you, and this is really personal to you, get in touch with me privately. That's why I'm putting my business card out there. I don't expect you to stand up in front of the crowd. So the idea was to get her much more at ease with describing what this is, so that somebody in the audience could potentially hear, but not feel like the only way they could interact was immediately on the spot
Right.
and potentially embarrass themselves. And this was really eye-opening for her, because a lot of times, business owners are so close to what they do. And in her case, she was so close to what she did that she kind of lost touch with the fact that, look, you work in this business. So hair loss is like, for you, it's like every day of the week. It's really not a big deal because this is what you've been doing since you're a kid.
Right.
But for the woman who's a new person who's now experiencing this, you right off the bat can be a real hero just by being informational. Oh, it looks like you've got this condition. You should go see this kind of doctor. And if it turns out that that's true, I can help you get through it with a number of different solutions. So it's really getting her, and again, getting back into this, why does your business exist? Women, have different issues with hair loss, right? How are you different? Personal touch here. I really have a deep understanding for all the different conditions that go on. I completely respect your privacy, and I want you to come to me in private, not as a client, but just informationally. Because ultimately, if I'm doing the right thing, you are going to come back to me because I'm building a bond of trust with you. I'm not just selling you on something you have to come and do with my business. I'd say, off the top of my head, that's a pretty good example, off the top of my head for
Yeah.
wigs anyway.
Right, right, right. You've worked with some, large companies, obviously Ringling Brothers, Walmart, Disney, and CVS, and some others. How do you see that being different from the small business owner, like, the person that does the wigs and helps women with their hair challenges? How do you see those being different?
Well, so this is interesting, right? If you've never had the joy or pleasure of flying to Bentonville, Arkansas, beautiful place, but to deal with the buying office at Walmart, it's a truly unique experience where um, every major company obviously is dealing with Walmart unless they've got a prestige brand, and they're not interested in selling it through Walmart. But
Right,
every mass market item, those people are in there. And the pressure that you feel when you're in, let's say you've got a meeting, it's going to be noontime here. Um, you've got a meeting coming up at noon, and the way Walmart works is everybody works through these same 15 or 20 offices, small little offices with just a plain metal desk. And the person that's in there now will be out of there basically right on the tone of noon. And from noon until 12:30, you've got that much time to set yourself up, to do your presentation, to take your feedback, be grilled about your pricing and all those other things. And the only difference between that and somebody making a presentation in a one-on-one basis in a local community is the dollar value of the transaction. Because maybe Walmart now is, talking about spending $5 million with you. And so, you really feel your heart pounding because
right,
that's what you're there for. But really, it's no different. The preparation that goes into it, your ability to answer questions and deal with concerns that your customer might have, the intentionality of how you go into that meeting and showing somebody that you are organized, that you are prepared, they're really essentially the same. I wouldn't go into a meeting with somebody one on one in a Starbucks, a potential client of mine, any different than I would go into that Walmart meeting, other than maybe I'm dragging a bunch of samples with me that they have to review and look at and be impressed with, versus if I'm going into a one on one meeting and I'm selling my services and I just need someone to be impressed with me. But it's all the same. I've got to be dressed correctly. I've got to
hmm
be there early, not late, not shuffling in at the last minute. All of these things, all this kind of professional preparation is really the same, whether you're doing it one on one in a local meeting or you're going and doing it at one of these big, big companies. There's just a bit more involved because you are traveling to some, far off location, Bentonville, Arkansas. Or if you're going to CVS, you're up in Rhode Island. If you're dealing with Walgreens, you're out in the Chicago area. So there's some bigger travel involved with it. But to me, if you're properly prepared for a meeting, it's the same going to Walmart as it is going to Starbucks. And if you don't, if you don't give your one-on-one client the same respect and professionalism that I would be giving Walmart, then to me, you really haven't earned the business. Then you haven't done a good enough job of wanting to impress your buyer with what it is you can deliver to them.
right. So to me, what I'm hearing you say there too is that your messaging that you're giving to the Walmarts of the world should be the same messaging that you're giving to Gary Heldt in the world.
Yes.
And it shouldn't make any difference.
Right. Because if you think about it, right? So now we're talking, if I'm going in a meeting with you and we're talking about service, again, we go back to that same question that we ask ourselves ahead of time. Why does your business exist? What's different about it? Well, when you go into Walmart, and this is something that people who are in the product business really always fail to understand. Hey, Glenn, I've got this, this great product, this is what it is. It's a shampoo or it's a water,
Right.
whatever it is. And I said, oh, Yeah, it looks really exciting. So where do you see that selling? Oh, it's going to definitely be in every CVS in the water bottle area. And I'm like, well, that's interesting. Why don't we go take a walk into CVS and take a look at the shelf? And we get there, and guess what? They've just restocked their shelves, and every single space, you know what it looks like when they've just done a
Right,
restocking of
right,
everything is filled. And I said, do you understand what's going on that shelf? And they're like, what do you mean? I said, there's no space there for your item. And so, in order for your item to get there, you've got to appeal to the buyer and tell them why they need your item as opposed to one of the items that's already sitting there. It's an awful lot of pressure to be able to prove that to somebody that you're a better, whatever it is, bottle of water than the bottle of water that's sitting there. So now if you take that and you exchange that for the services we're talking about, who does, the Gary Heldt marketing now, right?
right,
If you've got somebody that does that and I want to essentially steal that business, I've got to impress you that I'm a better person to do it, that I'm a better person to help you with your messaging based on my methodology or examples that I can give you, or even doing some of this work up front and giving you a taste of what it might look like for you, right?
hmm,
You're still sitting there in the buyer's chair and you're making a decision. I've already got this service from somebody. What's going to make me want to get something different from somebody else? And I find in a lot of the professions, the legal profession, accounting, um, bookkeeping, all of these different services, that if somebody is already, more or less subscribing to something like that, they've got somebody that does that, and somebody else comes along, you can't get away with simple things like we're a full service
right,
accounting firm, because it just shows me that you haven't really taken the time to go through these exercises that I'm talking about and really come up with ways that you truly are different, where you can truly explain to somebody, I'll bet your fill in the blank doesn't do this for you. That's what
right,
we do for our clients. And that to me goes so much further than the whole idea of we're full service or we do a little bit of everything, because that just doesn't say anything to anybody other than looks like you came to the meeting and you didn't really have anything new to bring to the table, literally.
right, right. Um, Glenn, what have I not asked you you wish I had?
Well, I think, one of the most important things I think that people need to understand is um, their personal brand, right? We spent a good deal of time talking about these small businesses where the individual owner also represents the business, right?
Right,
It could be somebody like you. I don't know how big a team you have there, but if you are in fact the spokesperson for your business and you are not developing a personal brand, and I'll talk about personal branding in a second, that matches the business that you're in, so that when we see you speaking, we feel like you're representing your brand, that they're really one and the same. We understand what they are. And today with social media, it's really, really important to understand the messaging that you're putting out there um, needs to match what you're doing. So here's again another good example. I don't know what your presence is in social media yourself, right? Are you on
hmm,
LinkedIn? Are you on Instagram? Do you do TikTok videos about the work that you do? Well, a lot of people that I come in contact with, Gary, will think that they want to be a comedian, or they want to be a political commentator, or you pick, they want to show off their cooking skills.
sure,
Well, if you're going out there as yourself, but you're also in a business that people are potentially seeing, and we see these two different personas that don't match, you're creating all of this dissonance for us, because now we don't understand, is Gary a chef or is Gary in finance and accounting, right?
right,
And so it's super important to be intentional about developing a personal brand. And now a lot of people out there don't necessarily know what a personal brand is, and I'll describe it really quickly so you can get it. Your personal brand is the impression that you leave with us once we've had a chance to interact with you for a bit and get a sense for who you are. So the way you show up at meetings, the way you show up in social media, the way you show up in your postings, that starts to form this impression on us of who you are, how you want to be known. And then when you're no longer around, how would we describe you to somebody else? Right?
hmm,
What's the thing that we think of? So the best example I always have for this, which everybody can relate to, is when you were a kid. everybody had a class clown somewhere in their history in school. And listen, a personal brand is not necessarily good or bad. It really depends on how you want to build it for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
But that kid who was the class clown, right? This is somebody that when you were no longer in their presence and someone mentioned the person's name, you'd think, oh, that kid's really funny, or he's really angry, or he really gives the teacher a hard time. You're forming all these impressions about the class clown brand. And so anytime somebody would mention this kid's name, oh, that kid, oh my God, you had to see what he did in class yesterday, right? So that became that kid's handle. And a lot of those kids, the one that I can relate to in my school, they liked that handle. That it got them attention, it got them noticed. It wasn't necessarily positive, but it was their personal brand all the way back then. They weren't necessarily doing it with great intention, but they just backed into it. They saw they got some laughs and they kept doing it. So if you think about yourself now, fast forward, and how you show up at the different meetings you go to, how do you want to be known? Do you want to be known as professional, authentic, or are you the person that the meeting started and you're always running in 10 minutes late? You always look maybe a little bit disheveled, papers all over the place when you open up your briefcase or file. People are looking at these things all the time and they're taking your signals and you're telling them, this is who I am. This is who I am. So just like we talked about the messaging for your business and being intentional about it, you need to decide, what image of me do I want to put out there in the marketplace? And does it match with the business that I'm in? So that when people see me or they see my business, we look like we're one and the same. We're really running down the same lanes together. And that, I think, is a really important thing that a lot of people just don't understand.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think that is, something important for people to reflect back on, to figure that out. So Glenn, if people like what they hear and they want to talk to you, how can they reach you?
Yeah, I'm really easy to reach, actually. My first name, Glenn, with two N's, at my company name, which has Always Been Creative. So it's Glenn at alwaysbeencreative.com. You can certainly find me. I'm the only Glenn Rudin on LinkedIn. I'd love to have you following me there, or if there's an opportunity to connect with me. I love connecting with people. And right on my website, alwaysbeencreative.com, you can book a free 30-minute discovery meeting, and we can spend some time, A, connecting, and B, looking over some of what you do. And I can give you a sense about how I work with people and the kind of work that I do. So those are three really easy ways to find me. And on LinkedIn, you'll find a lot of 95% of what I post on there are all tips on branding, on messaging, on personal brand, things like that.
Great. Glenn, I really appreciate your time today. I think it's been a great conversation, and certainly, to the listeners, hey, make sure that you take Glenn up on the offer of looking at your what you're doing now to see if he can help you. I think this will really help a lot of our business owners be able to move their business forward.
Super. I really appreciate the opportunity, and I hope that the information that I'm sharing today is valuable for them, because I know in what I see in the marketplace, a lot of people need help with their branding and their messaging and the way they show themselves out in the market. So thanks for the opportunity to share what I'm so passionate about.
Great. Thank you. Hey, this week my guest was Glenn Rudin, and he is the founder and CEO of Always Been Creative. I will see you guys next week.
49 faces looked to him in triumph. Over the last 12 months, they had each taken turns and promoted his business for a week at a time, driving over $987,342 in revenue. What if you had a network of 50 centers of influence who promoted your business every week for a year? Grab your copy of the #1 Amazon best-selling book, The Ultimate Guide to Growing Your Business with a Podcast, at 33% off the Amazon price by going to ultimatepodcastbook.com. Again, that website for 33% off the Amazon price is ultimatepodcastbook.com.